Jeremy Spike Cohen.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Burnsville, Minnesota. That's right. No, it's okay. You can applaud your name. Who here is ready to take the power back? Who here is ready to end the Republican gravy train, not just in D.C., but in every state in the union? Who here is ready to build a future for our children and their children and their children that is freer and safer and healthier and more prosperous than we have now? Well, folks, that's why Joe Jorgensen and I are running for president and vice president, because we've seen what has happened with the Republicans and Democrats having total control of every lever of power in government for over 160 years. They've used that control to steal your power, to steal your freedom, to steal your ability to make decisions for yourselves and your families and communities, and of course, to steal your money. The reason that Joe and I are running is because we recognize that the best way for us to move forward and to have that prosperity and to have that freedom and to have that happiness is for us to take that power back and take that freedom back and take that money back, and that's why we're running. Folks, who here is sick and tired of watching their loved ones, their family members, maybe even yourselves, sign up and swear to protect the Constitution and the American people against all enemies, foreign and domestic, only to be sent overseas by those same domestic enemies to fight and kill and potentially die on behalf of military contractors and central bankers and foreign dictators? And who here is sick and tired of watching those same people that signed up to fight on our behalf, if they're fortunate enough not to come home in a flag-draped casket, being subjected to the worst form of health care in this country, the Veterans Administration? Who here is sick and tired of watching the cost of living spiraling out of control and the gap between those who have and those who do not have continuing to worsen and widen because of disastrous economic policies from the Republicans and Democrats? Who here is sick and tired of watching entire industries flee, not just here in Minnesota, but the entire country, and go overseas or just go out of business because government is making it increasingly unaffordable for you to do business in America and hire Americans? Who here is sick and tired of seeing one story after the next, or possibly being victim of the next story, of an increasingly militarized and increasingly unaccountable police state brutalizing people, folks like in this community like George Floyd and Philando Castile, and watching bad officers who harm us walk away scot-free? And who here is sick and tired of watching that same militarized police state tell you, the American people, what kind of guns you should be allowed to have to protect yourselves and your families and your communities, while they go buy any kind of weaponry they want and stick you with the bill for it? I heard you. Who here is sick and tired of being told, oh, I'm not there yet. Who here is sick and tired? I got ahead of myself. Who here is sick and tired of watching entire communities being criminalized and destroyed because of this disastrous failed war on drugs? And folks, who here is sick and tired? Now it's time to say it. Who here is sick and tired of being told whether or not you're essential, whether or not you should be allowed to go outside, whether or not you should be allowed to run your business, whether or not you should be allowed to work and provide for your families, whether or not you should be able to live your lives because of a pandemic that was imposed upon you because they didn't let medical professionals test COVID patients for the first 2 months that the virus was here? Who is sick of all of these things? Folks, I'm as sick of it as you are. That's why I'm running. I'm not a career politician. I've never run for office before. And the reason that I'm running is because I'm sick and tired of seeing these things happen. And that's why Joe is running as well, because we recognize that the only way we are going to stop these things is by replacing these people with libertarians. Not just voting third party to get new people in office or get some new party in office, but to actual policy changes, to end the Fed, to end the IRS, to end the ATF, to end the DEA, to end police brutality, to end qualified immunity and the war on drugs and civil asset forfeiture and mandatory minimum sentencing and no-knock raids and cash bail and every other terrible Republican policy that they have imposed upon you and robbed you to pay for. That is why we are voting for Joe Jorgensen. And folks, let's be clear. These policies, the outcomes of these policies, these aren't unintended consequences that they had no idea were going to happen. We've been telling them in this party alone, we've been telling them since 1971 that this is what would happen if they did these things. They knew it and they did it anyway because they want you to be scared. They want you to be anxious. They want you to be desperate. They want you not to know whether or not you'll be able to afford to pay your rent or your mortgage. They want you to be horrified at the thought that you'll end up in an emergency room and be financially ruined for years. They want you to be scared. They want you to be desperate. They want you to be hopeless. They want to break your spirit, because if they can make you hopeless and if they can break your spirit, then it's that much easier to control you. It's that much easier to tell you that everything will be okay if you just give them the rest of your control, the rest of your money, the rest of your freedom. Then you'll be safe. Then you'll be healthy. Then you won't have anything to worry about. Then everything is going to be fine. Well, folks, we know that the sociopaths who put us in this situation are the last people that we should trust to fix the problems that they've created. That's why we're not wasting our vote for the people that created these problems. This election is far too important to vote for the same monsters who created this problem. That's why we're libertarian. That's why we're voting for Joe Jorgensen.
Yeah!
Now, folks, before I talk about my running mate, let me take a moment to talk about the folks who are asking you to waste your vote. Let's talk for a minute about Joe Biden. Oh, you've heard of him. Joe Biden, name a policy you hate: the war on drugs, the militarized police state, police brutality, the endless wars overseas. He's either signed it or sponsored it or written it into law or overseen its enforcement during his 8 years in the White House. Joe Biden is the architect of every bad policy to come out of Washington, D.C. in the nearly 50 years he has been there, when he's not busy sniffing children or trying to make women kiss him. And how appropriate that one of the architects of the militarized police state would choose as his running mate its most brutal enforcer. Let's talk for a moment about Kamala Harris. Uh-oh, heard of her too. It's a smart crowd. Kamala Harris, someone who has the distinction of locking away more people for victimless crimes at the state level than any other person alive. Kamala Harris, who at least twice that we know of, intentionally withheld exculpatory evidence in a capital murder case. Let me say that again. She knew that the person she and her office, at least twice, the person that she and her office were prosecuting for murder did not commit the crime, and she continued to try to have them executed and even withheld evidence that demonstrated that they more than likely didn't do it. Why? So that it wouldn't lower her conviction record. These are the folks that the Democrat Party have asked you to throw your vote away for. Now, while we're at it, let's talk about the other wing of that plane crash. Let's talk about Donald Trump.
He's got a small penis.
Say, stop leading my speech, pal. That's Donald Trump, lifelong crony. This is a man who has used the power of government to enrich himself at the expense of everyone else around him. Whether we're talking about using eminent domain to force widows to sell their properties to him when they did not want to sell to him to build his next failed casino project, and when that casino project would fail, using the bankruptcy courts to make sure that he unloaded as much of the debt as he could on his poor investors and keep as much of the profit as he could for himself. Donald Trump, a man that said that he would drain the swamp only to become the king of the swamp creatures. He said that he would lower government spending, and instead, we just found out that this year the federal government is going to spend $6.6 trillion, nearly twice as much as Barack Obama even spent in any single year. Yay, new record. Donald Trump, a man who said that he would end the entire national debt, and instead he has run up more debt in less than one full term than any president before him, including Barack Obama, who had nearly doubled the debt in 2 terms. Trump has beaten that record in less than 1 term. Donald Trump, a man who said that he would end this wars overseas and bring the troops home, and instead there are 15,000 more troops overseas now than there were when he got into office. Donald Trump, who said that he would protect our right to keep and bear arms. And he, with help from the NRA, have gone instead to pass more gun control regulations and executive orders than the last 5 presidents before you.
So he's Second Amendment, right?
And before I move further, let me talk for a moment about his running mate. Let me talk as much about Mike Pence as he has demonstrated relevance during this administration. I'm sorry, I forgot what I was talking about. I'm so sorry. That never happens. That never happens. Now, that's who the Republicans have asked you to throw your vote away for and to waste your vote. Let's talk for a moment about someone who is not a wasted vote. Let's talk about Dr. Jo Jorgensen. Let's talk about Jo Jorgensen, a brilliant self-made entrepreneur, a woman who we don't have to worry whether or not she's going to pass a cognitive test, because apparently that's a thing now that we have to worry about with other candidates. Jo Jorgensen, someone who is ready to lead from day one, not by taking control of your life or taking more power from you, but just the opposite, giving you your control back. Because Joe and I recognize that the best way that you're going to thrive, the best way your communities are going to grow and prosper, the best way that you're going to live safer and healthier lives is for you to have your power and your wealth and your freedom and your money back where it belonged, always in your hands where it always belonged. Folks, this is why the debate cartel is shutting Joe and I out of these debates, because they know that if you put Jo Jorgensen between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, 2 men who can barely form a coherent sentence between the 2 of them, and who are emblematic of every bad policy and action to come out of D.C. in the last several decades, and you put between them someone who will be able to demonstrate how they created these problems and how our common sense libertarian solutions will fix the problems that these sociopaths have created, that the game is over and that we win. That is why they're shutting us out, and that's why we have to be even louder than them. Folks, Joe and I, the Libertarian Party of Minnesota, folks like Chris, and there were only 2 Chris's, Chris, and Kara, and people across this country, we are working to build an army for human liberty, and we need your help. If you haven't done so already, I ask you to join the Libertarian Party. Go to lp.org and sign up today to join the party. It is the Libertarian Party that is the bulwark against the Republicrats and their aims to take even more from you, to make your life even harder than it is now, to make it harder and harder and harder for you and your children and their children. It is the Libertarian Party that wants to do the opposite. Put it back in your hands. Give you your money back. Give you your power back. Let you thrive. Let you live your life, and stop making it so hard so that you can grow in ways that they would never allow it. So join the Libertarian Party today. And once you've done that, go talk to one of these volunteers here, or to Kara, or to Chris, and ask them about joining the state party, joining the Libertarian Party of Minnesota. because that's where it's happening on the grassroots level. It is at the grassroots level that we are influencing our friends and our neighbors and our colleagues and our family members and loved ones, and telling them the message of liberty, and telling them why we are libertarians, why we believe that maximizing human freedom is the way forward for our communities and our society and our country. It is in the grassroots level where those things happen. So I ask you to join that as well. And once you've done that, I ask you to go to joe20.com, and we have a volunteer form that we would love to have you fill out. And if you're able to make a contribution, either online or today, then I would greatly appreciate it, because it is what we need to be able to continue to do bus tours like this. It is what we need to be able to go around the country to visit all or most of the 50 states at a time when our opponents are hiding in their bunkers and their basements from the American people who are out in the streets literally protesting the intended outcomes of their policies. We are here talking to the people in the streets about it and how we can fix it with libertarian ideals. And we need your help to be able to do that. Because folks, unlike the Republicans and Democrats, we aren't going to rob you to pay for our campaign. You may not know this, but Republicans and Democrats receive something called federal matching funds, which means basically that they rob you with income taxes, because all taxation, as we know, is theft. I know how to do an applause line. They rob you to help pay for their campaigns, because they don't just think that they're entitled to your vote. They don't just think they're entitled to your support. They think they're entitled to your money to pay for their campaigns. Folks, the Libertarian Party has never taken a penny of matching funds, and we never will, because we believe that if we're going to get your money and your vote and support, it isn't because we've forced you into it or scared you into it or coerced you into it or used the IRS to hold a gun to your head and force you to do it. It's because we earned it. We want to earn your support. We want to earn your vote, and we want to earn whatever contribution you're able to make. And if we have earned it today, I ask you to give what you can to be able to help us continue to spread the message of liberty, not just here, but around the country. So folks, we're going to get started with a Q&A here, and we're going to answer say 4 or 5 questions, and then once we're done here, I'm going to mill about and get to do some meet and greet with y'all, and get to talk with you and take selfies and sign autographs and all sorts of fun stuff. But before we get started on this, I just want to close and say this. As I said before, the Libertarian Party, this campaign, everyone here, we are fighting to build an army for human liberty, fighting for a world and a country set free in our time. And our time is now. Now, who's with me? Sounded like all of you are with me. So if you want to go up to this young man here, we will take the first few questions, and then we will start with the meet and greet. And while we're waiting for folks to come up, one thing I forgot to note: corporate funding. Last time I checked, Donald Trump had received around $100 million in corporate funding, and Joe Biden had received something like $150 million in corporate funding. I am happy to report that as of the last time I checked, the Jorgensen-Cohen campaign has received exactly $0 and 0 cents in corporate funding, for 2 very powerful reasons. Number 1, we'd never accept it, and number 2, they'd never give it to us, because they know these multinational, multi-trillion-dollar crony corporations know that when libertarians get into office and dismantle their systems and put the power and the money back in your hands, the gravy train's over. They can't just continue to sap from you and to take trillions of dollars from you and stick you with the bill with interest. They'll have to live within their means and pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and that's the last thing they want. And that's why they do everything they can to fight us getting into office, and that's why we have to fight back even harder. Hi, how are you doing?
Oh, doing well, thank you. That was a very serious speech, a lot of serious topics. I have a quick, easy one for you.
Sure.
When the Hollywood movie is inevitably made about the first libertarian president, who do you want to play you?
As long as that gets correct.
God,
Great question.
The first person that comes to mind is Steve Carell, but he's going to be so much older than me. But Steve Carell, I would say that, Steve Carell. Or go the other way, like Will Ferrell, where it doesn't even make sense. But if not that, then Steve Carell, yeah. Thank you very much.
Yes, why don't you ever talk about ending government-created monopolies, like, for example, nonprofit schools, public electric utilities, and these oligopolies of medical practitioners we have out there? I'm not hearing it in the speeches or seeing it on your website.
Oh, you should. Well, I would encourage you to look at my YouTube channel and the Q&As that we've done, because it gets brought up a lot. You're absolutely 100% correct. The government is protecting these industries. The government is protecting these, as you said, the oligarchs, these people that have entrenched themselves and protected their market share from any new innovative competitors by creating regulatory burdens that make it nearly impossible, or at least prohibitively expensive, for them to be able to forge ahead and do that. That is the core part of our messaging, is that the only way that we will be able to have true capitalism, a true market set free, is to dismantle these powers, and it has to happen from the government level. These monopolies and these oligarchies, these massive corporations that sap from us in our tax dollars and get tax breaks so that they don't have to pay their share, and then get stuck with and then get all the subsidies that we just paid for. None of that would exist in a market set free. That is why we need to deregulate. That is why we need a market set free. And that is why the government needs to stop indemnifying major corporations against lawsuits when they do measurable and provable property damage to us. So thank you. Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I want to ask a question: is how are we supposed to get Joe Jorgensen into the polls if when I answer the phone they never ask for Joe's name?
And if they do, if they call you and they say, "Are you voting for Donald Trump or Joseph Biden?" and you say, "I'm voting for Joe Jorgensen," and they go, "That name's not on here. Have a great day." One of two things happens: they either put you in this other or / didn't answer, which usually you have to go through the crosstabs to even see where that is, or they just hang up on you, did not answer. And that happens a lot. We've had a lot of people report back that, they just got hung up on. Well, that's not on the poll. And the short answer is there's not much we can do other than be louder than them. That is why we have to do this at the grassroots level. That's why we have to do our own video ad placement. That's why we have to get our message out there. They are not going to give us a seat at their table, because their table is a gravy train. Their table is a federal trough for the massive pigs to show up to take our money that they steal from us. So they're not going to give us a seat at that table. We have to make our own table, and we have to knock theirs over. That was a New Testament reference, by the way. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Mr. Cohen, and yourself?
I'm doing great.
I'm actually here on behalf of my father.
Okay.
He is a truck driver, and he wants to know yours and Joe's opinion on the trucking industry, and if you truly mean by deregulating the trucking industry so that they can make their lives without being told when they can and cannot pee.
Absolutely. It is none of the federal... Yeah, applaud that, by the way. Applaud it. And I'm sorry, you may have said your name, but I didn't catch it.
Heather.
Heather. It is none of the federal government's business what your father or truck drivers are doing. Go read the Constitution when you're done with this, and go tell me where it says truck driver, okay? And then when you're done with that, go read the 10th Amendment, which says very clearly that if the Constitution doesn't explicitly give grant a power in the Constitution to the federal government, it is left to the states or to the people, preferably just to the people. During the time that the federal government has been involved with regulating the trucking industry, the safety has not improved that much. It really has not. In fact, depending on how you measure it, it's actually gotten worse. In terms of property damage, it's gotten worse. You know what also has gotten worse? The average pay for a trucker. Because now they are stuck at, 10 hours that they can drive? They're told that... Even lower?
Depending on the state, it can go as low as 9.5 drive time, and then they can have 2 hours for going through their morning and evening checks, as well as being on the docks.
Yeah, and so as a result of that nonsense, you often see truckers parked on the shoulder of an interstate because they can't go any further. That's safe, right? For their safety. Just park on this little gravel area while people drive by 70 miles an hour. That's way safer than you driving another 20 minutes to a rest stop. This is what happens when the federal government gets involved. And truckers, their livelihood is plummeted. You have seen truckers that are driving illegally that just show up and go, I'm not getting any of these permits, and I'm driving as long as I want, so I can charge less, which puts truckers that want to do it the legal way either out of business or forced to take on more and more loads and make less and less money. It is none of the federal government's business, what truckers are doing, and if there is to be any role in the Department of Transportation, it should not be in that. That should absolutely, your father should be free to truck as he wants, because frankly, truckers are exponentially safer drivers. They're far better trained, and it's none of the federal government's business in the first place. So yes, we would completely deregulate that to zero. Hey, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. My name is Taras. I first wanted to sort of compliment you on your speech and also compliment the volunteers. We've had great messaging this year. Like, I think in 2016, I never got any texts about events, but this year my phone's blowing up and I'm loving it. So the question I wanted to ask is, where are we looking for growth opportunities in terms of picking up new voters and supporters, and how are we sort of changing our message? How are we changing our messaging to appeal to, you know, urban voters or folks out in the country, things like that?
So, and that's a great. You said your name is Ross.
Taras.
Okay.
Taras.
Okay,
Yeah.
Taras. Thank you.
Ross is fine.
Your name is Taras, I'll call you Taras. But thank you for your question, and that's an excellent question. We are doing exactly that. We are reaching out. Our strategy in terms of outreach and new growth is don't leave a single chip on the table. Leave it all out on the court. That was two sports. That was a poker and a basketball reference combined. Leave it all on the court. Do not leave a single potential voter or supporter behind, especially when they're out in the streets saying that they are sick and tired of what government is doing to them. What a perfect opportunity, whether we're talking about gun rights protesters or Black Lives Matter protesters or police accountability protesters or lockdown protesters, people that are out on the street saying government is harming me. I don't like it so much that I'm on the street telling you this. What a perfect example to reach them. And in terms of how we change the messaging, you don't really have to change messaging. All you have to do is listen. One thing I learned in over 20 years of running my business, which was largely a sales role, I was selling my business and my wares to different companies and to different clients. And what I learned is that the way that you can show people what it is that you have to offer is to listen to them first. Because A, they don't know a thing about you and have no idea what you're on about, and they're a little bit suspicious of you to begin with. And B, once they start talking to you and telling you what their issues are, they are creating bonds there. They are already associating you with someone who is sympathetic and empathetic and cares about them. And while that's happening, you're hearing what it is they care about so that you can effectively message to them. And that's what we're doing. We listen to what their concerns are. We validate and empathize those concerns, and then once we have shown that we understand what they're going through and that we care, then we can take them on the journey for how maximized human liberty is the way forward in every single aspect of our lives. That is how we do it. That is how we go from 3.25% in the last election to the 35+% that we'll need to actually win the Electoral College. That's how we do it. Go to where they are in their spaces and from their precepts, listen to what they're saying, empathize with them, and then take them on the journey for how human liberty is the way forward for all of us. Thank you. Hey, how are you doing?
Hi, my name is Janine, and I'm from Maple Grove. And
Maple Grove.
Yeah. I wanted to get your input on how you feel about negative income tax and using that as a welfare replacement tool. I am a big fan of Milton Friedman, who was an old school libertarian. And I just want your opinion on that. Whether it's sometimes it's called universal basic income,
UBI or negative income tax. Yeah. So here's the thing. So I think there's the potential short term to use these types of things to streamline the way that the social safety net exists. Because right now we are not running to get rid of the social safety net. We're running to put the ladders back so people can climb out of it, because 99% of the people in it don't want to be there. I've gone to housing projects and talked to folks who own nothing, and yet they have these little, they call them side hustles, but they're businesses. And because they can't afford the tens of thousands of dollars in licensing fees and zoning fees and everything else to do it legally, They just do it on the side, and it's enough to put some money in their pocket, but not enough to actually grow a business. They're literally not allowed to market. And I can tell you from 20 years in business, marketing is where it's at. They can't do it because if they do, the police show up with civil asset forfeiture and take everything from them. They don't want to be there. So we put the ladders back and they climb out of it. In the meantime, these are types of things that, negative income tax, UBI, potentially are ways to streamline the social safety net so that instead of means testing, we're just providing a basic level of relief. Here's where the problem comes in. It was Janine, right? Here's where the problem comes in, Janine. When you create a system whereby the government is simply handing a check to every single American in this country, two things happen. Number one, you massively increase the money supply every time you're doing that, which, as we know, thanks to the Federal Reserve, which we plan to end, by the way. I know how to get applause. Once we do that, once we give that power and we increase the monetary supply, that causes the cost of living to go up, which means that over time, let's say $1,000 a month has to become $1,200 a month, has to become $1,500, has to become $2,000, and so on and so forth, until eventually, far enough down the road, we have a snowball effect where it gets really, really bad, where suddenly the money is truly, truly worthless. No one even wants it. Here's the other thing that happens. When you give government, when you give politicians the ability to campaign on one single issue, how much of a check they're going to give you, that's all they're going to talk about. You're going to have me sitting here saying we need to maximize human freedom and liberty and give the power back to people, and you're going to have two other people saying, I'm going to give you $5,000 a month. And then you're going to have another politician going, that guy doesn't care about you. I'm going to give you $10,000 a month. And when you create that, you are creating the ultimate federal trough, where they can just literally buy people's votes directly through that. So those are my concerns with those types of plans long term. The issue that we are facing, why so many people need it in the first place, over and above those regulatory burdens that make it so hard for people to move up the economic ladder, to move out of poverty, is also the fact that the federal government controls our currency. Which means that since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, your money has lost 98% of its value. Imagine if your money was worth 50 times what it's worth right now. That is how much they have robbed you over the last 107 years. So in our mind, the long-term answer, Janine, is to take the power of currency completely out of the government to begin with and put it in the hands of the free market. Because now, instead of your currency being issued by a monopoly that has a vested interest in that money losing value over time so that the debts they run up lose value over time, instead, your currency is provided by competing providers that have a vested interest in your currency gaining money over time, because if it doesn't, or if it doesn't gain as much as one of their competitors, they'll lose your business to the competitor. So the free market is the answer here. Short term, there may be a role for negative income tax or UBI, but I would be very careful with how to use it because of the potential for what it could do long term. Thank you. Hey, how are you doing?
Good. My name's Travis. I'm from Big Lake, the land of the rock sticks and cows, according to Emperor Palpatine. Governor Waltz.
That's Big Lake?
Yeah.
Big Lake!
So the first thing I want to say is just thank you for being actually a morally, person to vote for, when you're sitting there and looking at Trump and Biden. But
Thank you for not being a monster. You're welcome.
The second thing is, we talk about ending victimless crimes.
Yes.
So that's coming down to physical, financial, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. What about emotional crimes that, it's kind of hard to go about? Let's say the guy that scares the woman, down the alley, or her boyfriend that's threatening to kill her but doesn't physically or financially harm her.
So, you gave some pretty stark examples of where you're, a threat of violence or a terrorist threat or something like that, I would argue is not a victimless crime because you're literally threatening to murder someone. It gets a little more murky with someone just being a bully or something like that. And the short answer is, that really needs to be determined by those individual communities. And I'm not saying that as just a sloth off of your answer. I'm saying that because I'm running for federal office, and I don't think the federal government should be involved at all. In my personal opinion, in my community, how I would want it to look is that the line, and this is where it's a little bit arbitrary, would be deciding, did the person who is hearing this have a legitimate reason to think that they should fear, that they should be afraid? Or were they just being bothered or hurt? Because bothered or hurt
you know, if you start calling it a crime to bother or hurt people, you go in a direction you really don't want to go in. But you have to have the line of like, does this person really believe? Would they have a reasonable reason to believe that the harm was actually being caused? And it is. There's a gray area there, unfortunately. But I would tend to err on the side of if there's any question whether or not the person had a reason to believe that their life or their livelihood or whatever was in danger, erring on the side of freedom of speech and expression. But again, I believe that individual communities should be able to make that choice. That's what was intended with the framework of our country. Is instead of having this, top-down, across the board standard answer, one size fits all answer, allowing individual communities to make those kinds of tough, on the fringes types of decisions. Thank you. So, folks, that is the end of our Q&A. So I'm going to start mingling, and Kate's going to come up here and talk with you. But I just wanted to thank you so much. Give yourselves a round of applause for coming out.
And keep it going.
And we are going.
Isn't Spike incredible?